Well, the Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit is an iconic one for a reason, and a real driver's favourite for a reason. You can see just how committed you have to be, especially out on that Grand Prix loop down through Hawthorns, through Westfield, Sheen Curve, Stirlings. You've got to carry the momentum, especially in these relatively low-powered front-wheel drive tin-top cars. They do not pick up speed all that quickly off the corners. You've got to carry the speed through those quick corners out on the back of the circuit, and that means you need to be fully committed to getting those corners right, and that can be tricky, especially on cold tyres, and that's what the drivers right now are contending with, because they're on their opening laps in this 15-minute qualifying session that will set the grid for round number 1 of the championship. As ever, 2 races coming your way tonight, and the second of those will feature the usual reversed grids, so that one always bound to produce lots. On board here with Max Edmondson then, as Jack said, one of the real-world Civic Cup drivers. He knows the car pretty well then, and at the moment he is heading down towards Hawthorn Corner on a flying lap. Jack, I believe you have driven the Grand Prix circuit, haven't you, here at Brands Hatch? Something I've only been able to do in the sim, unfortunately. Is it as big a thrill ride as it would appear to be from riding on board here?
Yeah, I'm one of those rare drivers that I've actually only driven the Indy circuit once, and I've driven the GP circuit about 4 or 5 times. Yeah. So I'm one of the lucky breed, I think, out there, because everybody says, although the Indy's quite fun, the GP's really the sort of dream circuit you want to do, and I can completely understand why. I think I take it for granted, because Brands Hatch isn't my favourite circuit, mainly because I haven't really ever had very good results around here. But I will tell you, if you do get an opportunity to go on a test day, or they mainly exclusively keep it as test days, don't they? They don't tend to do track days around there, but it is absolutely belting. It's fantastic fun, and when you go out to the back section, it is all about commitment. Shift down a gear, throw the car in, hope it sticks, because if it doesn't, you're likely going to touch a bit of grass and you're likely going to end up in a barrier. So it really does separate the best drivers, and the bravest drivers don't always get the most amount of time, because you can be brave and bad, unfortunately, in motorsport, can't you? And if you take a little bit too much speed in, you end up with either a wrecked car or a lot of gravel. Either way, it's going to slow you down, sort of thing. So these drivers are going to have to know their car inside and out and know every inch of this track if they're going to maximise the speed. But we've seen that these drivers as well in the Cayman Cup and touring cars. We've been to Brands Hatch a lot at VRRC. These drivers should know it like the back of their hands. It's just a case of getting to grips with the car as Reece Bell goes off the circuit. I did have a look, actually. Reece Bell stuck some notes in the broadcaster chat that they give us some notes to sort of give a bit of a background about the drivers. He came pretty much dead last in the Cayman Cup, and he wasn't embarrassed to admit that. And he also wasn't embarrassed to admit that he's actually got some help off the HFT boys, who obviously dominated the likes of Carl Felvis and the rest of them, to try and speed himself up a little bit, get some race confidence going into these qualifying sessions in this series. So he's hoping to be a couple of places higher maybe than off the back of the grid.
Yeah, well, looking forward to seeing how he does. At the moment, he is a few places higher than the back of the grid. 13th fastest in this qualifying session. Edmondson fastest from Jordan Brennan and Max Bird. Not at all surprising that 3 of our real-world drivers, 2 of whom have real-world Civic Cup experience, Edmondson and Brennan, are at the top of the field. Max Bird, of course, with experience in Mini Challenge, also very similar front-wheel drive tin tops. Those of you who are perhaps not familiar with the Real World Civic Cup might be wondering why this is the older Mark II or P3 Honda Civic that you're seeing. Well, that is the car that's used still in the Civic Cup. If it ain't broke, don't fix it and all that. These cars are still really popular. You can get hold of a donor car pretty cheaply, and part still readily available. That's the key, really. So keeping these cars going in the real world is still very much achievable, and that's why the championship continues to be extremely popular. And these cars, I think, actually are a lot more fun than some of the other shape, the EP4, for example, Civic, which there are a couple of them racing in the real world championship. I think these cars are just more fun, certainly based on what a lot of the drivers that I've spoken to have told me. So an old car it may be, but as you know, Jack, from your experience at Cadwell Park, that doesn't mean they treat them like old cars. They throw them around, and of course in the sim they really don't have to worry about mechanical sympathy, do they? I think we're going to see some hard racing from these cars.
Yeah, and bumping and bruising, it did look like proper touring car racing out there at times at Cadwell, but that sometimes is the only way round to get round people on that circuit, isn't it? A couple of drivers did have the FN2 at the weekend. I know one of those drivers was Dave Marshall, who is taking to the real world in the production class of the Civic Cups, and I think he got 3 seconds in the end, which he was a bit disappointed on because he qualified on pole. But he has one of the new FN2 shapes, and he says that the EP3s just have that little extra oomph in a straight line still, even if the FN2 has a little bit more of a turn-in sort of, shorter wheelbase or something. I'm not sure why it was, but it just seems to have that characteristic. So the majority of the grid are therefore still using the EP3s, and like you said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. A lot of these drivers will know the car like the back of the hand. The likes of Edmondson, Brennan, who's probably hoping that his gearbox won't explode like it did in real life on Monday, is also straight up there. And to be honest, he's absolutely rapid in the sim. You could chuck him in any form of Civic. It could be 50 years old. He'd probably still be in the top 3.
I wonder how valuable a 50-year-old Honda Civic would be. Fairly valuable, I'd imagine, because I don't think they've been designed by that point.
You know what I mean.
I do. I have to say, Joel Lask, I'm noticing, up there, 3rd fastest. Not at all surprised to see Joel going well here. He wasn't necessarily a front runner in the Cayman Cup, which was our most recent championship here on the VRRC Wednesday nights. But this is a front-wheel drive car, very similar to the touring car trophy machinery, with which he had quite a bit of success in the previous championship to the Caymans. So Joel Lask starting to show that maybe front-wheel drive is very much his forte. He's got Max Bird here in 4th position, less than a 10th of a second behind him though. And Max Bird, who Jack has had some pretty exciting news actually in recent times, has Max, and working now alongside Porsche, isn't he, as a Porsche development driver, I believe. So Max Bird really on the up in the real world, and we know that he's a force to be reckoned with here on the sim.
Yeah, I've seen his announcement being banded around social media and everything like that. And to be honest, I logged on tonight and I saw Max Bird, and you mentioned Mini Challenge, and I was thinking that's not the reason why I know the name. I couldn't connect the dots. But you're absolutely right. Of course, he got that announcement with Porsche. Well, he announced it today. Obviously, the deal was probably done a little while ago. But no rest for the wicked. He's on to the sim and decided, you know what, I want to try my hand at these front-wheel drive cars still a little bit and get myself hands on some prizes as well. So brilliant to see Max Bird, and again, it's just showing that VRRC is the place to be for all sort of competitive sim races and real life races, for their competition to be as hotly contested as it is, because we do have very good driving standards here at VRRC. We pride ourselves on the new ballast system, which we haven't explained too much, but we'll go through in a minute, because everybody's probably wondering why there's various colours and numbers on the side of their names on the timing tower. But basically everything that gets put into VRRC is to try and give the most realistic competitive edge compared to all of the sim racing leagues out there, and I think they do a fantastic job with it.
Speaking of doing a fantastic job, Scott Bugner goes second fastest, Max Bird up into 3rd. So we're getting some quite late improvements actually here. We're coming towards the final 3rd of the session, and we're starting to see more drivers getting towards the sharp end of the field. And the other thing, Jack, that really excites me here is that we've got not only a big grid here, we've got some 24 cars entered into this season opening round, but the top 15 of those right now covered by less than a second, and it's a decent length circuit, the Brands Hatch Grand Prix layout, and yet the times all exceptionally close. That's exactly what we wanted to see. And as you said, that handicap system, the handicap weight system, has a lot to do with that. I think if you're new here on the VRRC and you're wondering what those brightly coloured numbers are next to the drivers' names on the timing tower, they are all relating to the relatively new for last season in the Cayman Cup handicap system. So the higher the number, the more weight, the more ballast is added to that driver's car. So a blue number 3, for example, for the likes of Max Bird, Eric Axelson, Carl Felvis, means they're carrying 30 kilos of handicap weight. A red number 5, well, that's as high as it can go. Jordan Brennan carrying the full 50 kilos of ballast, whereas those sort of orangey, bronzy coloured zeros, well, those drivers are carrying no ballast at all. And Max Edmondson enjoying that very much with a whopping lap time that he's just put in to go quite comfortably now to the top. He was already fastest in the qualifying session, but even further up the road now. Will Redford goes 3rd, and that's another big improvement as we head into the final part of the session. But that handicap system definitely playing its part here. We're seeing some of the lighter cars at the front of the field, and the reason that some cars are lighter than others, well, it's based on that driver's success and experience on the VRRC. So the likes of Jordan Brennan, who have won multiple races, multiple championships on the VRRC servers, has to carry a bit more weight than those with perhaps a bit less experience. And from what we're seeing so far, Jack, it's doing its job.
Yeah, exactly. And the way it works, as you mentioned, it's all about your VRRC experience, not necessarily your real world or other sim experience, unless you are a massive exception, of course. So the drivers that are currently on zero ballast, the likes of Edmondson and Redford, if they start winning, they'll very quickly find themselves on probably 20, 30, maybe even 40 kilos by the end of this championship. It is adaptive. Every single round, they refresh the sort of ratings. They see where you're at. They see your consistency and fastest laps and everything like that. And they will add ballast between rounds if you deserve it, put it that way. Which is why Scott Bugner, I think, was on 10 kilos at the end of the last championship, is now on 20. And you'll probably see the likes of Redford and Edmondson at least on 20 in the next 2 weeks, I would say. Brilliant drive from Edmondson to get that lap. And we mentioned a full second separating the top 15. Because of that lap that Edmondson put in, the second has now gone down to the top 9. So he's absolutely flying out there. Half a lap quicker than Scott Bugner, who you mentioned is doing a brilliant job as well. Mick Sutton is the only driver in the top 10 at the moment who is improving on his lap time as we go into the last 2.5 minutes. Jordan Brennan actually just improved his sector 2. But not quick enough to improve himself, I don't believe. So we'll have to keep an eye out on him. But I do like the fact that there are so many variations of ballast out there in the top 10. It just goes to show how well it's working, especially the likes of Jordan Brennan. He's flying normally in these sort of qualifiers. He's fantastic at qualifying on pole position and one-lap flyers. But at the moment, in 5th, because he's just getting handicapped a little bit, and that's exactly what we want to see.
Yeah, I mean, inside the top 6 on the grid, we've got one representative from each of the handicap sort of bands, haven't we, that we've got. There are no drivers carrying 40 kilos, but every other handicap weight represented on those top 3 rows, so it's clearly doing its job. Reece Bell here, we're following, down in 20th place at the moment. We're not going to lose sight of that car unless we have a surprise round at a safari park or something later on in the season. That is a very distinctive livery on the number 9 car, which turns into clearways, comes out through Clark Curve, and looks to try and get the slipstream from the car ahead. The slipstream will play a part on some circuits, some of the slightly more open flowing circuits, perhaps like Thruxton, Donington Park, in these slightly boxy, unaerodynamic Honda Civic EP3s. Reece Bell not able to use that slipstream on that occasion to improve, but he will have time for one more lap, and he now has to hope that he doesn't catch this other driver in an inopportune place. It looked like maybe he was a bit tentative on the brakes into Druid's Corner, just in case that car ahead braked a bit early. Still got most cars out on track, actually. Only 2 of them are in the pit lane at the moment. Paul Laramie, sorry, no, not Paul Laramie. Number 31, Redford, Mark Redford, is in the pit lane. And in fact, Chris Shepherd there just jumping up ahead of him into 16th place as a result. The other driver in the pit lane is the 639 of Jones. But a busy track right now as drivers try and improve into the final few seconds of the session.
It is always a bit difficult, isn't it? Especially around a track like Brands Hatch, to get that little bit of space to put your flying lap in. As Reece Bell was finding there, you can be in a decent space, you can get into a good rhythm, cars at a good temperature. But if the driver ahead of you, if you're not quite sure about what they're going to do, whether they're going to be a bit tentative, then it can be dangerous to try and push as hard as you can. Scott Bugner's been pushing as hard as he can. Now he crosses the line to take the checkered flag with an improvement as well. It was only an improvement by 1/10 of a second, which wasn't good enough to put him on the top step of the grid, but he's still on the front row as it stands at the moment. Will Redford hasn't posted any quicker sector times. Max Bird couldn't post a better sector either. A better lap. Jordan Brennan doesn't look like he's going any quicker. In fact, nobody in the top 12 really looks like they're going quicker. So at the moment, Scott Bugner, I'm sure, will be very pleased to be on the front row of the grid. Max Edmondson will be alongside him, obviously taking that pole position point, or I believe actually it might be 2 points actually. I think we've been saying it's a point for the past couple of weeks, but I believe they get 2 for qualifying on pole.
Yes, I will get that double check, but I think you're right. That does ring a bell. So even more worthwhile going for the pole positions. Max Edmondson should have this wrapped up by now, hence why he's decided to bail for the pit lane. So in he comes. Looks like those 2 points, and we have just had it confirmed. It is 2 points for pole position, are going his way, but what sort of positional changes will we see down the order, if any? Andy Carroll there pushing on. Eric Axelson comes out of Clark Curve. He is 7th right now. in the number 75 car. He's about to come across the timing beam, though. Can he improve? Doesn't need to find a lot to improve on 7th. In the end, can't quite find anything, though, so he stays where he was. Still got a few drivers out on laps, though. McSutton heads for the pit lane. I think we did just see a slight improvement there. That might have been the 10th place driver, Dorman, who managed to jump up a position. But generally speaking, I think we've got the front of the field pretty much set now. Edmondson looks good for pole position. Scott Bugner second, Will Redford third. All three of them have seen the checkered flag, with Max Bird heading for the pit lane in fourth and Jordan Brennan having also completed the session. So an interesting look to the front of the grid there, Jack.
It absolutely is, yeah. I can't wait to see how the likes of Edmondson, apparently Will Redford only signed up to VRRC yesterday, fresh off the back of his Cadwell Park experience, I'm sure. So I'm excited to see how he gets on. But we're going to take a very, very quick break, and hopefully we'll have a chat to our pole sitter after this.
Welcome back to the VRRC and the Maximum Networks Civic Cup, which gets its season underway here tonight on the Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit. Qualifying has just been completed. We have our first pole sitter of the season. We have our championship leader indeed, because 2 championship points go to the fastest driver in qualifying. And in this opening qualifying session of the season, it was Max Edmondson who set the fastest time. Max, congratulations on not just clinching pole position, but demolishing the opposition. That was one heck of a lap.
Yeah, it wasn't bad, to be fair. I did have a target for myself, which was 1 minute 40 of some sort, which I just managed to do, but I was on for a 7 and then messed it up, so I'm not too happy with myself, but obviously pole by 4/10 isn't too bad.
You know what, I hear that so often from drivers that absolutely crush the opposition and then turn around and say, oh, I could have gone even quicker, you know. The rest of the field will probably be not too happy to hear that. Of course, being quick in qualifying, though, doesn't guarantee an easy race victory, does it? Especially in a field this competitive.
Yeah, and obviously the tyres in this car and around this track are not the best, so you will see a lot of cars being slow towards the end, because obviously the left-hand side of the car does seem to struggle, especially with weight, which I'm fortunate not to have any.
Yeah, that's interesting actually, because those high-speed corners around the back, they do wear out that left front tyre. So will you be pacing yourself? Can you afford to pace yourself in the early stages, or do you just, you know, push hard, try and build a gap, and then manage the tyres as and when you need to?
I haven't done much race running, but I know after about literally 2 or 3 laps, the front left does start to just destroy itself, so I generally don't know what to do. Probably go for fastest lap at the start and then just pace myself, to be fair.
Let's speak of the start then, because getting these things off the line, I'd imagine, can be a bit of a challenge, and the last thing you want to do is undo the hard work from qualifying, so a practice start's something you've been able to do a few of.
Yeah, there's you can just kick it into gear, you can slowly release the clutch, you can drop the clutch. There's a few different ways, and I think they're all about even. It's just obviously your reaction time will be what kills you or doesn't.
Awesome stuff. Well, Max, congratulations on the first pole position of the season. Best of luck for race 1, and let's hope we're chatting to you again in 20 minutes or so on the podium.